We're on the air.
Thank you.
All right. I'll call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, as always.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the Public Transportation Advisory Committee for Wednesday, May 14th. It is 7:02, and the first item on the agenda to conduct is a review of the minutes. If there are no changes or objections, I will take a motion to approve the minutes.
Make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. And on to agenda item, the next regular business, which is the fun part, finally. Road typology mapping exercise. I guess that's referring to what we did last time.
Yes, I think it's continuing the discussion
Yes.
from the mapping. We don't have the map, and
We don't have Colin.
we don't have Colin or
Bart.
Mark or Bart. So they have the information that we had from the previous meeting and the discussion there. And what we can do and work with today is reviewing the typology. We kind of categorized
Yep.
some of the streets when we were doing the mapping exercise, but if we could maybe have a little bit more discussion about what we want for categories of streets and,
Yep.
and how we want to structure that. Using some of the images that are in the packet and handout to identify some of those important features. I think we can start to make some progress in identifying the categories or typologies that we want to use and creating that library or catalog of images or features that would go along with each of them.
Are we aiming to move to a place, just so that, like, I know where we're headed with this. Are we aiming to get to a place where let's say, a placemaking street would be described with, materials, is it a standard that we're creating, a policy that we're creating? Where's this information going to live? I guess are we going that far into that detail, or are we looking for examples that we can share?
I think we are sticking to policy level, developing a policy that identifies key features and elements that should be considered for those types of streets.
So are we doing this for DPW?
I think
Or are we doing this for developers, or both?
Probably both.
Yeah.
It would likely be, and I mean, there are going to be situations when it comes to DPW, for the most part, DPW is working on streets that already exist. So
Right.
there are some specific constraints that have to be
Yep.
accommodated there. So some of that may be limited. However, DPW works on resurfacing plans and roadway maintenance plans. So when we are looking at a street, knowing what classification of street it is and what types of features we want to see more of, then we can consider, is this a street that should have sidewalks? Is this a street that should have street trees? Or
Yeah. Or
and-
this kind of curbing, or that
Right.
kind of curbing,
Yep.
yeah.
So having some of those identified and not getting as specific as material types and calling out those things. Those are more design standards
So
that can be left.
Okay.
The
We're not
higher level
engineering.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
you get what I'm saying.
Yes, yeah, well, no, I mean, I think that's important to kind of,
No,
No,
I
that's-
was,
Clarify.
I was curious
Yeah.
as to, who our audience, what is the
Yeah.
end game here?
yeah.
And it's I think where it kind of started, and for your benefit, Carol, because you weren't here when we started some of
Thank you.
these discussions,
That's
I
true.
jumped into the middle.
I do forget
one
about
of the examples that you see in here is a policy from the city of Lebanon So the City of Lebanon has this policy statement for design and construction standards for streetscapes. It's specific to the streetscapes. It doesn't get into detail of materials, but the streetscape elements to be considered on certain types of streets, and they have these categories. And I, in my prior employment, working as a consultant, did a lot of work in Lebanon with the city, but also in reviewing site plans and developments and new development. And it's a very easy thing to follow for developers coming in and saying, I'm gonna subdivide, I'm gonna do this type of development, which type of street is this, and what features do I need to consider accommodating when I'm working on the design. So it's kind of high-level design guidance for developers in new construction, and then also considerations for when we're redoing a roadway, reconstructing areas, what kind of things can be worked.
Incorporated.
Yeah.
All right. And this is short, it's easy, it's,
Yeah, and it doesn't get too
So why don't we start
into the weeds here.
with that a little bit,
Yeah.
so that we,
yeah.
and then go to the pictures to accommodate Mike a little bit. Good.
Boy, this also opens up a bigger question. We should probably, it's not for us, but almost have specs for the entire town when a developer comes in. How often are fire hydrants, or, and not to engineer it, but there are a lot of things that are questionable, but
We do have some
Some specs.
of those, kind of more specific to the utilities
mhm,
and the, like wastewater, water
Yeah.
system. When it comes to roadway design standards, we generally follow DOT
yeah.
design standards and their item numbers and specifications for highway design. So, we don't have a lot of those specific details in our,
The reason I
Ordinances?
mention that is that this is not codified in any way, so it would be a document lost in a pile of paper type of thing versus,
right,
you look like you were about to.
Oh, we have a member of the public here that, this is Holly. She,
hi.
we were talking the other day, her family's very interested in the coast service and public transportation. And I said that, you might want to come to the meeting. I didn't have the agenda.
Okay.
So I was just trying to signal to her that we're not discussing coast tonight necessarily.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I will come back whenever you guys do discuss it. All right?
Well,
Okay.
well, we
Well,
will.
actually, public comments, so can we take public comments just to hear her while she's
Yeah,
here?
I
if
think
she's got a
I was
comment?
just about to suggest that. Exactly
Yeah.
right. Since you're here, and I feel perfectly all right to
Oh,
interrupt the conversation that hasn't really gotten started yet. So I think since you're here and you made the effort, if there's something that you would like to share with us for us to consider maybe taking up at the next meeting, I do have later on a little coast update, but it's nothing. Yeah, nothing that you would be bad to hear about later.
The microphone?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
If you would want to come up and state your name and address, please.
Sure, I'm Holly Pettit, and I live at 41 Bay Road.
Thank you.
and I just wanted to come and support any efforts that we can have to get the Coast Bus back. I have a son that's going to UNH next fall, and he needs a way that he can easily get back and forth without driving. He doesn't have his license yet, and I don't, even when he does have his license, I don't want him as a young driver rushing to class, you know, trying to find parking and the whole 9 yards. Plus, he doesn't have a car, so it would be wonderful if we could have the bus.
Yeah.
Because there's no Wildcat bus and there's also no Coast anymore. And in fact, one of the reasons that when we moved to town 5 years ago, we loved the fact that there was a bus, and that we thought that as my husband and I age, we will want the bus more and more, and that as my son, you know, wanted more independence, he would be able to jump on the bus as well.
Right.
And now that he's going to school up in Durham next year, we kind of need it. So that's all I wanted to add, really.
No, I appreciate that. I'll just share the little.
Yeah,
Little
let's
tidbit.
keep on the coast for a second.
There's not, but you are aware that we have a little tiny bit of coast service, and I say little bit because it's essentially an on-demand service. Takes you from here to Exeter.
Yeah,
Right?
I was aware, but what I had heard that it only can take you to the supermarket or the hospital. Is that true, or can it take you anywhere?
No, it can. It is, as long as it is at the moment. This will change a little bit come fall. But the Route 7 on demand can take you anywhere in a certain radius along the old Route 7, which was a connection between Newmarket and Exeter going through Stratham along 108. And so there's a radius, a 3-mile radius around that route that that destinations can or pickup points can be located. There are some time constraints and day constraints during the week that you'd want to consider, but that's certainly available. Unfortunately, it does not connect you to Durham.
Yeah.
There really is no public transit or public transportation option to connect you that way.
Yeah.
Not for getting to class the way Wildcat Route 5 used to.
Yeah.
But it's good to know, and we'll work on expanding how that works here in town, and knowing what kind of destinations people are looking to reach is really important in that work. As you know, funding for public transit is not exactly rich in our state, and as funding is not even what was requested by the transit community, it's unlikely that we'll see any expansion of services, unfortunately. And with federal funding being in jeopardy as well, the future is quite uncertain.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. Well, I just wanted to let you know.
Yes, I
that
appreciate
there's
that.
at least one family here.
Yeah.
This is having a bus, and we had been hoping that it would be there when my son launched off into the UNH universe. And knowing what kind of public transportation we used to have, I mean,
Right.
buses, and then way back with streetcars and things like that. I mean, there's so much that we lost in terms of public transportation.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
There used to be about 20 kids who would get on the bus down at Arbor Park,
Yeah,
headed for UNH in the morning. That bus stop was
every day.
yeah,
huge.
Yeah,
And it slowly disappeared, and unfortunately, the only other thing I might mention is it might not be bad to attend a council meeting and public comments at a council meeting and let your thoughts be known there as well. I'm not so sure the funding's going to be there, but
Yeah.
the council really makes all the big decisions.
Okay, all right.
Holly, did you have a chance to do the coast
Yes,
survey?
Yes, I did
Okay,
it.
good.
My husband did it. I'm gonna get my kid to do it. I also sent it around to the deacons, and several of them filled it out as well. So, you know,
Send it to all your neighbors.
exactly, exactly.
Honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
that would be great.
Yeah.
So do we have a link to that survey on the town website?
I don't know if it's on
don't
the
know.
website. It was in the last newsletter. The link to the survey was there, so.
I think it is on the
It
town
might be
website. If
on
you
the
scroll
website
down,
if you
there
look in the
are,
news.
yeah, I can kind of picture it, because I think that's how I got there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there someone, I mean, I don't really go on Facebook anymore, but maybe if we put it on, you know, what the hell happens in Newmarket or
It
whatever.
was linked to
It was
what
linked
the-
on there?
from the
Yeah.
Main
It was.
Street
Okay, good.
Corporation,
Good, good, good.
so it was there. The Newmarket Main Street Corporation linked it onto what the heck is going on.
So
Okay.
just
The,
so,
the
Well,
New,
we're doing-
Newmarket
yeah.
pages.
The Newmarket pages.
That's
Thank
right.
you, yes.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. I just wanted to drop by and
Thanks,
say
Holly.
hi then.
thank
you for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
Thank you
Come,
for
come by
listening to me.
anytime.
So that survey, I believe, is, everybody check me, closes on the 17th?
Pretty soon,
I,
yes.
I,
So
I think
anybody
you're
else?
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it is the end of this week.
Take it.
Yeah, it's a short survey, so if you haven't taken it yet, and even if you have, you may have made a mistake the first time.
Vote early, vote often.
They do encourage, just anybody watching, they encourage riders and non-riders, potential
Yes.
riders and non-riders
Right.
to take that survey.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good point, because the information from non-riders is also useful in terms of why aren't you using this service? Why don't you currently, and what might make you change your mind
Right.
and decide to use it, so.
So I don't know
All
if you
helpful data.
heard, but the fund, you remember the funding for Coast 7, Coast 7 On Demand was, going to run out by this fall, and luckily, Coast was able to obtain funding to maintain that service, whether it need be with the same restrictions that it has been thus far, or whether there's some flexibility is something that we should have a conversation with Coast about as we go into the summer. And following that, I would actually suggest that for future meetings that we have public transportation as one of our regular business items, so that we can keep that conversation going. If there's nothing there, then there's nothing there, but I think it's good to keep that, a conversation that we contribute to on a regular basis and keep each other up to date on. A further conversation that I think we should have as a committee is how, considering the constraints on public transit and the funding streams being what they are, how can we utilize the resources that we have in town to take the most advantage of the public transit resources? In other words, if the bus runs and stops at downtown and maybe on Exeter Street somewhere on its way to Stratham, let's say, if you live, up on 152 or down Bay Road or wherever you are, you may not be able to get there. So it's great that the bus is there, but you would be able to use it. So maybe there is something that we can come up with in town to create a feeders system, feeder service, something to that
Well,
effect.
years ago, we actually considered bike racks at the bus stops.
Yeah,
But the bus, years ago, and the buses disappeared, but there were people who kept locking their bikes just to street signs at the bus stops.
and most of the coast buses have bike racks.
Well, this is
So-
just for the people who just wanted to, the
would
people who
probably
just
prefer to
ride
ride
their
there
bike
and then
to the
take
bus
the- yeah.
stop and then leave their bike there all day, and they were locking them to street signs and stuff. And there was a little bit of concern, there was some thought it was the one
Yeah.
in front of the
And
hardware
that,
store.
I mean, I think that would be a really wonderful way to make the system work more seamlessly, to have, a good, safe
Yeah.
way to.
You get that first
have your
step, and then
bike.
that
Yep.
bus takes you right to T Hall. You
Yep.
don't really need your bike on campus so much,
Right.
but
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
the good old days.
Yes, but I think the good news is that there will be funding and that we have something to work with, at least as things stand right now, and how we feed into that system is something that we can consider as we go forward. And I think that the going back to the street typology, that is a kind of a means to that end as well, to create connectivity to the public transit system in a safe way. So you have a
Right.
way to walk there, you have a way to bicycle there, you have a way to rest on the way, those kinds of things. Can we return to the street
Typology.
Thank you
typology?
for being flexible.
No, thank you for making me be flexible.
So I think we were, Mike, you were asking how we codify.
Yeah, we're just thinking that this particular document, I like it, it's brief, it's short, but I think that somehow if it were in a system where you'd come across it instead of, there's absolutely no way of putting this, in next to everything else about roads,
Right. I think, so, some things that we could consider or ways to incorporate this in Newmarket is some of these elements could be incorporated into our site plan review standards, subdivision site plan review standards, because we do have reference to road designs there. We have, I don't think we have a specific general road design specification ordinance, but we probably need to work more towards having a standard roadway design so that it's not only housed in the site plan subdivision review and
Right.
could be kind of more standalone. So it could be something that we incorporate there, or it could be a recommendation from this committee for the Public Works Department and code enforcement to work together on determining where that should fit, but it could fit in a couple of different areas to help codify that information and make reference to the other appropriate sections. Because I know specifically with some of the new development items, having it in, at least if it's not fully incorporated there, referenced so that design standards can be found elsewhere within the
Right.
code and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, so. And I think probably also parking ordinance, if we're gonna touch on any on-street parking. We do have a parking ordinance, which is going to be updated soon. I know we've had some discussions with PD about that, so there could be some references to other ordinance sections and code chapters that we could work in.
Yeah, I know, because in site plan review, oftentimes there's the review by the department heads,
Yep.
and it's been kind of ad hoc. It's like, well, let's have a guardrail here, let's just kind of point to things, and it wasn't by, engineering standards, it was just like, well, we should probably do this, or let's do that. And
Yeah.
the developer I'm thinking of just said it was just, you never know what you're gonna get, because there's no standards, you get told in that meeting what you're gonna do.
And it
Yeah.
depends on who's there and how they're
Right.
feeling, so
Right,
it's,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so.
We are working towards having more
Yeah, and this is
standardized
before you
outlines
were
of-
here, so that's a huge difference, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would kind of go along the lines of where's this going to live, and what it kind of seems to shape up to be. No, we haven't taken the first step yet, but it does shape up to be kind of a little bit of a project in the making.
Mhm.
As to where are we
Yeah.
going to take it, and what kind of what do we need to know about where elements of this already live, where it needs to be accessible, and and to whom it needs to be accessible. But before we get there, let's see if we have any comments on the Lebanon policy, because I do, at first, if I can start,
Yeah.
I love the simplicity of it. You know, it's very nice in that way, and I think what's amazing is that with such seemingly little detail, you get a really good picture of what the intent is,
Yes.
right? Like this is what we're talking about here, and I think that's really well done, and it reflects very well the conversation that we've had about the types of streets that as we perceive them, you know, especially the local street typologies are, you know, really reflective of our conversation. At least that was my impression. I don't know if you guys feel similarly.
I will say that this, and yes, you're right, oh goodness. Having come in a little bit late, I was coming a little short, but this is the first time I'm looking at this saying, okay, now I get what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then this discussion now about site plans, where it would live, because I'm always thinking, what's the audience? Who is going to get this material? What are they going to do with it? So this makes sense. I do like the simplicity. Obviously, it would have to be tailored more towards Newmarket, but I think it's a place to start. The definitions are simple. The definitions are clear. I understand what they're talking about. I don't have to ask for any acronyms. So I'm really,
Right?
no, there's no acronyms. There's clear, concise, full words. It's a good thing.
Yep, I agree. Any other reflections, feedback?
Do you want to talk about what functional classes and names would make sense for Newmarket? Because we've kind of discussed, we weren't necessarily using the term of placemaking as a street, but downtown seems to be kind of, when you say downtown street, everyone kind of envisions that segment of Main Street, where you incorporate a lot of these different
Yeah.
elements, the lower speeds, ample sidewalks, facilities for other modes of travel.
Yep.
So would you want to use downtown instead of placemaking, or do you want to get into that kind of stuff tonight?
I do know that the, who was it, Historic Association? Or somebody wanted us to have separate standards for the historic district. It was Newmarket,
Okay.
it was Newmarket Main Street Corporation. Wanted separate standards and actually was offered to fundraise for different style street signs. They wanted the historic district to stand out and pop a little bit. And at the time, Steve said, look, we'll wait till we have more standards in place. He didn't want to move before we kind of had a plan as a town. So this is actually kind of feeding into that plan for the town.
It seems that, we've all talked about the historic district in downtown and the existing downtown area. And it is a placemaking, we want that to have placemaking elements. But as we think about like the expansion of the downtown area or the concept of placemaking, and we think about going up toward the thrift shop, that's no longer considered the historic district.
Right.
So but we still want that to have placemaking elements. We want that to connect to the downtown area, as we would if we kind of went up Main Street, made the curve. What do we call that?
Exeter Road?
South
No,
Main Street.
South Main Street. As
Going
you
up
turn
towards
Towards Town Hall.
Yes,
Yep.
as you come up to here towards Town Hall, because I think that connecting Town Hall into the town is also
Yep.
kind of important. And as we go down Exeter Street, we want those to have place-making features, but we don't necessarily want them to be downtown historic district.
Right.
So it does make a lot of sense that the historic district would be set aside, but also have the moniker of placemaking, or have the features of placemaking. Does that make sense?
It does.
Like there's an overlap there.
I do think we need to come up with a term that's not placemaking and not downtown.
Okay.
But that-
I think placemaking, to me, is a function that could be present in more than the downtown streets. Could be in the local streets. In fact, it's something that we should really consider as as something that's important for placemaking. Not so much the flow of traffic, but what else can the street accomplish? And downtown, I don't know. I mean, so that I would treat Main Street differently from Chapel, for example, but they're both downtown.
Right.
And I think so. I think that term may not quite do it either.
Well, it's interesting that zoning does have an overlay district of the, it's being outdated now, but the M2 Main Street.
Yeah.
So it's different, M2 is the whole zone, but if you're but Main Street,
Yeah.
you had some different regulations just on that one little, you had to abut Main Street, and then this applied to you too.
Mhm.
So they did kind of refine that. I guess, one piece could be, it could be the historic district abutting Main Street,
Mhm.
or something like that, or it could, the village core had been used for, as a.
I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
I
that's
like Village Core. I do like the way they're thinking about the placemaking
Right.
piece, right? That I think just a different term for it would apply to Main Street, Exeter, to South Main to some degree. I think it's a good type. I just wouldn't want to call it placemaking. That's all. And I think
Yeah.
downtown limits it a little bit,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Village Core, I can picture what
Mhm.
you're talking about. I can picture that it goes off of, right off of Main Street, it goes up, maybe towards the high school, it goes up towards the town hall. To me, downtown is one small section of Main Street.
And we can quantify where it ends on Main Street or whatever. If there's a limit, we could say up to the bridge or whatever we want to say. And we can quantify, it's not all of Main Street, but it's
Right,
this
it's that
section.
segment.
Yeah, I just think with Village Court, isn't there a chance that this type of street might want to be used again like in a different location, like a new development?
Ideally, eventually, it
Yeah.
would be something that could expand out.
Stretching,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good point, good point.
I've heard them called destination streets before.
Destination Street.
Okay, that's an,
That has a similar ring as placemaking.
Mhm.
And I think that hits our Main Street quite well too. Destination street. A place that you go to, not just travel through.
Right.
It's almost like
Just the
there
same idea.
are different placemaking 1, placemaking 2, placemaking 3.
Yeah.
That there are placemaking is like you said, it's a concept. It's
Yeah.
not that is going to have different definitions depending what street we're on. The destination is I think that's kind of cool.
Mhm.
if I can, when I first moved to Newmarket from another town, one of the things that appealed to me is that I could walk from where I am on Bennett Way, and I could walk into downtown, and there was someplace to go. I could walk somewhere and go get a cup of coffee and read books, or there was a destination. Where I lived before, you can walk all over the place, but there's no place to go.
Mhm.
And so it's something that I learned is important to me. Which is why I'm saying destination, because that really was one of the things that I realized after moving here. It was a destination.
Yeah.
So I think that that's perhaps a very apt term that can be replicated for other parts of town as
Right.
things change, as other neighborhoods become, more connected in other ways.
Mhm. And it's not exclusive to downtown. Could be,
Right.
Right.
could be other locations that are destinations.
Right.
Well, maybe
So-
we'll use that as a
We'll use that for now,
yeah
at
placeholder for
least
now.
for that
Destination.
See how it
similar
fits.
definition, yeah.
Yeah. 'cause I
See
do-
if we still think the same way at the next meeting.
Yeah, because the definitions and descriptions, Low speed traffic and such, is it's concise, it's like, okay, I can see what we're getting.
Yep. we don't really have, through roads the way they're defined here.
No, no.
Do we need to,
Well, the Route 120 is, I believe that's just a state route, so it'd be similar to 108.
yeah,
Well,
it's a little bigger.
We have something already defined.
Yeah, I don't-
120 is.
We could probably just not have something
Right,
like that. That's,
Yeah.
we don't have something like that, and I don't think we necessarily want to either, so.
right.
We can
Right.
skip right over
That's
that.
kind of my point too. We don't really want
I was
this,
gonna say, no,
so
no.
we'll just strike that. And the connector, street, because, like 152 and 108 coming into town, well, okay, 108 is basically a destination street if we, or an extend, or it is desired to be one,
Well,
all
for
the way
108,
from one line to the other. I mean, it's not much.
yeah.
Okay, Newfields is a little bit, that's a little bit farther, but there's an element there of the road that is not, like 108, that wouldn't be present, and 152 that wouldn't be present on other streets in town.
Right.
The high volume traffic. So how do we capture that? Because I think we should capture that separately. The state routes, I suppose, right?
Yes, those are
We
state.
identified something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I forget what regional connectors?
We might have-
Is that,
we-
maybe
that
that's what we termed the regional
Regional,
connectors?
yeah.
Because those are the ones that are a lot of commuters to
Right.
neighboring
Like Lee Hope
towns.
Road
Right.
is also one of those, or,
Ash Swamp is
yeah.
one for sure.
But I think we also have, the key word for me here is transition.
Mhm.
As we come into town, you're coming from a relative, for our area, a high speed.
Yes,
And you're wanting people to slow down.
yes.
And I wonder if we shouldn't define a streetscape for a certain length of that transition that will help drivers know that they're coming into
Mhm.
the destination area, that the speeds are dropping, that
Yeah.
let's just, okay, we're no longer
Different
on-
types of participants in the street, or in
Right,
the,
that you're gonna start to see pedestrians,
Yeah.
we're gonna start to, so should we consider, we're talking about a regional connector, so that would just say, I drive 108 toward Durham a lot, so I'm just gonna reference that. But I know the town line is there, but just as you're coming in, that transition period where you're dropping from 45 to 30. Maybe we have one more drop in there. Maybe we drop to 40 first, or we drop to 35 first, and maybe we think about elements in that transition period that would be an additional streetscape on each of these routes coming into town. That would, be a welcome to Newmarket.
All right, so you said something visual that, I'm driving, I do the other one, I come from, 108 from the Stratham area. So you're just saying something, whether it's a welcome to Newmarket sign, something visual that cues people into the fact that, oh, there's something coming up, I should slow down?
Yeah.
Right, and is there, a cross-section, do we,
Like an
Is there-
additional class?
yes, that's what I'm saying, and just for those specific transitions,
Mhm.
like a different profile or cross-section that says, maybe we start some curbing, or maybe we have certain signage, or maybe we have certain plantings, or,
Well, I don't know that, and this is coming from my transportation engineering experience. I don't know that we necessarily need to classify elements of the transition, because the transition happens over a segment of the roadway where you go from. And however that transition happens is somewhat dependent on the access points and what's there. One of the things, when you pointing out coming from Stratham,
Right.
we talked about with New Hampshire DOT, the road safety audit, how to transition that area around the intersection at Bennett,
Mhm.
because it's expansive, it's dangerous. It doesn't seem like that's the transition point, but that's where it is. So
Right.
what we want to do is make it go from where it's rural by the car wash and further south to looking more like our destination street. And that transition just happens over a stretch of roadway there. I don't think we necessarily need to say what elements need to be in the transition, but we just know that that's where it shifts.
Okay.
Yeah, we worked on a lot of that with the Main Street program, where coming northbound into downtown, right at the bridge, there was a desire to have a lot of visual cues to slow down, and it actually really worked. Cars did slow down, and they wanted to look a little more choked down, and that was the kind of cutoff, right after you go over the bridge, when I want to know to slow down here. And it seemed to work. It does. Well, of course, the lanes got narrow too.
Right.
You know,
That always helps.
but people realize there's something different happening now.
Yeah.
Was kind of the idea.
And I think the transition, the elements, you'll start to see some parts of the destination street elements incorporated into those transition
Yeah, so.
segments as
I-
it's going from.
Yeah, I was just saying, do we need to quantify that a little bit? Because we will have it ultimately on 108 coming in from the Durham side, something on 108 coming in from Stratham, on Main Street coming in
And
from
we probably have
the
it
Lee
like
area.
152, or the intersection with Grant Road,
Yeah.
South Main, that's another transition area.
Yeah, so
I mean, I
I'm
think-
just proposing, do we need to quantify what that transition looks like and add it as a category, or no?
I think what you might be getting at, or one way to get to that too is, first of all, the destination streets would be designed to accommodate pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorized vehicles. In a kind of so feature those as participants, right, in the streetscape. That I think that's a new element that wouldn't be there on 108 coming in. That wouldn't be there on whether you're coming from Durham or from Stratham, and it wouldn't be there coming in on 152 either. You know, we're just there somehow, and then all of a sudden we become kind of recognized participants as bicyclists, let's say, or as pedestrians. We're there, and so, you know, I've seen this in towns as we transition into a more urban core, with signage, to advise people of, this is what's happening here now. This is, watch out for this, and this is how, and bicyclists, are on the road or are, so you're telling people this is what's going to be happening, or this is how this street functions. That might be one way to get to it.
But it would be a function of the placemaking road,
Right.
typically,
Yeah.
not,
Right,
not a
exactly.
separate
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. I think so too.
Yeah, I think the roadway design and the roadside structures kind of dictate a lot of traffic behaviors more than signage, and even the MUTCD or whatever says cautions about having too many signs. People
Absolutely.
don't even really
Yeah.
read them, and it's just kind of a feel-good thing that, we put up a sign so they should know there's a blind driveway. They don't work.
Right. Yeah, and I don't mean like a sign where you just
But-
you stop and read, and this is how.
Yeah, but you feel it when you enter it, and
Right.
the one thing.
Or
unfortunately-
you just have a sign that says, bicycles are on the road.
Yeah.
It's just standard street sign, and
Yeah.
that just wasn't there before, and now it's here.
Right,
You know?
but so many people don't even see signs. But to do something, and the one thing I always think of when I see other places that do something fantastic, that's great, but we have snow plows. They
Right.
do, in Mexico, it's topes. When you enter a village, you hit the topes, and if you hit them fast,
Yep.
you're gonna be replacing parts of your car.
Yep.
So, but speed tables, things of that sort, that you really feel it, that that you've entered a village core.
I mean, that is it's interesting you saying that. I'll just relate this real quick, but my family used to have a little place in a village outside of the city where I grew up, and as you entered the village, there was a section of cobblestones that you would drive over,
Right.
and it slowed everybody right down. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Well, and
went very
UNH did
quickly.
the brick crosswalks, which all fell in, and the
Yeah.
kids call it Chunchtown. But it actually slows everyone down, because when you go over the sidewalks, they all kind of caved in,
Yeah.
and they didn't fix them. We fixed ours, but now they've got speed dips over every crosswalk
Yeah.
in Trenchtown.
Yeah, so maybe, I mean, those would be kind of real, real transition points,
Yeah.
physical ones.
So
I think 108 coming in from Durham is actually a really good example of how a transition can work, because sidewalks appear, the speed goes down before you even enter. I know it's the town line, but that whole Simon's Lane
Yeah.
area, it functions kind of as a way to to communicate to the driver that you're coming into an urban area. It
And
just
those
happens.
dynamic speed signs work really well. We put one up there, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you have data on that, but those things seem to really work. At least they work for me.
Yeah, me too.
I'm shooting for a
They're
thank
real,
you.
They're real. Yeah, me too.
Okay,
They're
the
real
dynamic, I
reminders.
was gonna say the dynamic ones that say you're going such and such.
Yeah, it's usually blinking red when I first see it.
Those are more effective than any squad car or anything else as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned, because all of a sudden you're tooling along and like you said, oh, red cheese, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yes, I think that those are very effective. Perhaps we can have more of them that don't require being, or the more permanent ones, but yeah. they
I
work.
think the science is that they do work.
So a question to answer maybe is, so the both the destination and the local, if we keep local, and I think local makes
I think local makes
tons of sense. Both of those explicitly mention pedestrians, bicyclists, etc. The connector does not, and so how do you get from a local street to the destination safely, right? If you have to use a connector to get there. So this is all to say, shouldn't all participants always be considered somehow safely? Not the same way, right? But it should, because you want to be able to get from, your house to, the park, and if that means leaving your local street then you have to get there on a bicycle too. And I think that should be a change we should consider.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have limited access on any of our roads in town. So all forms of transportation should be considered, and it's very true that there are a lot of bicyclists on 108,
Yeah,
and it's
152 as well.
not always safe. I mean, there was a hope that there'd be a bike lane between Durham and Newmarket, and it just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and bike lane went away. I guess it's safer, I don't know, but the bike lane's not there.
Right. No, it's not, and it was promised initially. I remember that.
It was
too.
unfortunate, yeah.
Yeah.
It's budget cuts.
Yep. So that would be a suggestion that I have, that we add, that we make sure that any connectors accommodate, bicyclists and pedestrians as well.
And we are seeing, I mean, Hildy, it's Hildy, right?
Hillary.
Hillary, thank you. She drives that little scooter thing, and there's
Oh,
a
yeah.
couple of those around now, and there's a few kids from the
Oh, yeah,
school that are buzzing around
Oh, yeah.
on them.
Oh, yeah, more and more,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Certainly UNH, we're seeing all over the place.
Yep. Right, exactly, and that going 2-3 miles, 4 or 5 miles on one of those is not, there's no problem at all.
Yeah.
At first I thought, oh my gosh, local is just small, low speed, low volume. The majority of streets in the city are considered to be in the local class, and I thought, oh, okay, that's it.
And
But
then you turn
then
the
you get
page.
detail. Okay, that saved it. Because exactly right, there are different kinds of local streets.
And
we-
we did kind of talk about some of this in the sense that
I think so.
Hersey and Durrell
Mhm.
are local
Local
collector
collectors.
streets.
Yep.
Because those do bring a lot of neighborhoods
Yep.
together.
I mean, we talked about, I thought this was
We have
the
a lot of the
notes of
same-
our conversation.
Yeah,
Like, well done notes with, lots of contouring. But yeah, exactly right. And we have quiet streets too. In fact, the streets going up the hill from Main Street
Mhm.
are quiet streets.
Mhm.
And, there's no through traffic, there's no through traffic wanted either. And if it is to be utilized, it's more likely that it would be utilized by pedestrians than by drivers, just because of the nature of the way it enters Main Street and connects to it. So I like those a lot, and I guess you would. I also really appreciate the idea of a shared travel way, and that does not necessarily have sidewalks. That does not mean that you just pave the whole thing and it looks just like a. You can still make it inviting to pedestrians and communicate to drivers that this is a very slow street. This is
this is a mixed-use street.
yeah, where pedestrians kind of have the right of way.
Yeah, there was certainly Church Street in Burlington type thing.
Yeah.
Pedestrians are clearly the priority.
Yeah,
If you need to make a delivery, yeah, you can pull in there.
that's right.
but-
Exactly right. And I think we'll have some examples in
Yeah.
here as well for those kinds of things. So I really like the descriptions too of the local link, the local collector, and the quiet
Yeah.
street.
Yeah.
Fits so well.
I think we had been using the term neighborhood street when
Mhm.
we were doing our mapping exercise.
Right.
Do you have a preference on quiet street, neighborhood street?
I mean, I think
Quiet neighborhood street.
yeah. I mean, I think
Make it both.
quiet street seems more. It says more than neighborhood street
Yeah, it
to me.
includes other types like Central Street, where it's not really a neighborhood street, I guess, but that still
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
inviting to bicyclists and pedestrians on the road, maybe.
Right. Yep, I agree.
That and probably like the cul-de-sac streets would probably be like that as well.
Sandra, you at one point had talked about a separate designation as a quiet street that you had seen, I think, overseas, where a neighborhood could,
A play street,
a play street, that's what it was.
which is used in several countries in Europe. There's a standardized sign for it as well, pretty clear, and it's a street in which playing on the street is to be expected by kids. It's not a through street. It's if you have a really slow, small cul-de-sac that may, let's say there are 10 houses on the street or something like that, that clearly limits the amount of traffic that would go in and out anyways, except for now we have delivery trucks all the time. But even so, and then so the streetscape is much less of a through and more of a curved, navigating around, whether that's plantings or whatever, and the surface may be permeable surfaces so that you have, rainwater can enter the ground easily. You don't have asphalt maybe, so that it's not so hot, those kinds of things. But I don't know if that's a concept that would work really well here. It may work well if you have a new development. That may be something that somebody would be interested in considering. Really trying to build neighborhood. and so it might be something that one could reference somewhere, but I don't know that we can, that it lends itself to, retrofitting or something like that, because we tend to have such wide lanes.
Hmm.
I do like the idea a lot too, though.
I'm obsessed with it. I think it's fantastic.
No,
No,
I wish we had it more.
We used to play street hockey in the streets.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
it was called street hockey for a reason. And you take the
Yes.
car and grab the goal and slide it off to the side.
Yep.
And the car would go by, you put your goal back out there.
Everybody would scream, car!
And it says, yeah, exactly, and it says,
There were a
we,
couple of neighborhoods off Stratham Heights Road where I lived and where I raised my kids, that we basically, like, my kids would cut through the back fields and go over to Holmgren, which is where all the kids would hang out and ride their bikes and in the street,
Yeah.
because it was a cul-de-sac street, or a little ways up Sweetland Place, which had about 10 houses, and the residents of that neighborhood had banded together and actually had a street light put in that they paid the electricity for collectively, so that the kids could be out at night
Yeah.
playing in the street.
yeah,
But they were streets, they were cul-de-sacs, they called them at the time cul-de-sacs, limited traffic,
Right.
and everyone you just knew that, the kids were there and
Yeah.
you were a second-class citizen if you had a car. So,
I mean, I like the idea of the play street, and if that's something that we want to, could maybe flesh out a little bit more as a designation.
yeah, I think it's worth looking at, I mean, because I think that there are places, and there have probably been for time immemorial, that organically become
Right.
that without being called a play street, but as soon as you were using the term, it's like, oh,
yeah.
I know what you mean.
We had one street, we painted a full basketball court. It's just all the kids out there with white paint. We took two people's basketball hoops and put them both sides and made a court,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's,
What do you think about something like that, Lindsay, from a engineer's perspective?
I like, well, so directly from an engineer's perspective,
Mhm.
I was at the DOT ACEC tech transfer a couple of weeks ago, and Bill Watson from DOT gave a presentation about DOT's new complete streets policy, and he referenced a picture of his neighborhood when he was a kid, and he was like, this is a complete street, looks like a regular street to most people, no sidewalks, just very residential, quiet street. He was like, this catch basin right here was home plate, that was the
Exactly.
outfield, like,
Right.
and that's the way he described it, and it was a room full of engineers. So I think when you're talking about play streets, that's what engineers see as a quiet neighborhood street. That's how it should be used, and you don't have to build a lot of infrastructure into it
Right.
to designate it as that. It's just the look and feel of the neighborhood and everything around it. I think you're right that a retrofit doesn't necessarily lend itself to having that as a typology. We could potentially consider incorporating place streets as something that Newmarket aspires to have.
yeah.
So considerations for that type of development should be incorporated with new development coming in, and you can kind of designate what,
I mean, there are some streets in New Village that might,
yeah.
be ripe for that.
Mhm.
Cutting through.
That's exactly the type of the street we would play on.
Yeah.
Right. So,
And I think if we're, okay, that sounds really exciting, because that's something that one could take into a neighborhood too, for a neighborhood conversation.
Well, it sounds like something that Bart would be all over.
Yeah.
And I
But
think
very
it's important to
interesting.
point out that it's not just kids who like to play in the street.
That's
And,
true.
Yeah.
sometimes grow up
Actually,
liking-
there's I don't know what it is what's the pickleball thing?
Oh, yeah,
It's a
pick-
pickleball court on the intersection of two roads in Durham.
Is there
It
really?
wasn't kids, it was, people, the school teachers that are ready to retire, but they painted it on the road. They started with badminton,
That's
they moved
great.
into pickleball.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
Guerrilla
actually,
planning.
I could see that.
So,
I
so
can
maybe
see-
we'll add that as a possible local
Okay.
street typology. I kind of like that too.
Yeah,
What do you-
yeah.
And on that note, because I mentioned the DOT complete street policy, that's kind of what Lebanon turned this into. So Newmarket does not currently have a complete street policy.
Right.
So we could be developing a complete street policy.
good
And
idea.
that could be what this turns
Okay.
into as something that can be recommended for adoption as
Yes.
That'd be great.
something for the town. So that's another, just kind of going back to our
In
discussion
fact,
of how
that
do we do
may be
this?
the way to do it, just as from a high-level perspective,
Yeah, I
to
mean,
have a complete street
we're just talking about,
policy.
everybody's
And then
complaining
it kind of
about
drives and
speeds.
guides all of the ordinance things, and it doesn't require specific updates to any of the,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, a complete street does calm traffic, and we were just talking about it. It's every town, people are complaining about speeds on their roads.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, suddenly that's the thing, is that people going too fast, or it's just the 2% club, I called it, it's like, it's,
And there's, I think another thing that's different from when we were kids and we would have basketball courts in the street and all things, is the delivery services.
yeah.
That are Amazon trucks and UPS, and they're all of them, people that are on our streets that don't live there.
Yeah.
Even DoorDash and that kind of thing. There's traffic on our streets that is unfamiliar, that was not there when we were kids.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's not gonna go away.
I've
It's
found
that it's not going to go away.
I found
unless
the
they come out with
Amazon and
those.
UPS drivers very good. I think the pizza delivery ones are the not so ones. Especially the one particular pizza delivery service, they fly through town, and but I think Amazon seems to be, I see them a lot, even though I see them a lot.
Well, I'm not trying to disparage one or the other. I'm
No,
just
but
saying
I
the
think
volume is
yeah.
there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. I mean,
And the
it's definitely
unfamiliarity
something
is
to consider, especially. Yeah, we'll have to figure that one out, because it does make it harder when you're thinking about designating a street as a play street where you're inviting people to be in the street, because that's kind of the point. But is that a safe thing to do if you have
Right.
3 delivery trucks coming by in the morning and 5 in the afternoon? I don't know.
I don't know, but I
I mean,
think
we-
like,
Yeah.
but I think like anything else, that if you have play streets, whether it's a delivery service or
Yeah.
an individual, the expectation is they're going to follow the traffic laws and the
That's right.
traffic rules. And the traffic rules in a play street would be, you go really, really slow.
That's right. You go to speed
You-
of walking.
You go, it drops down from 20 to 15 or 5
Yeah.
miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's the expectation, and they will just have to learn to incorporate that
That's true.
into their manifest for the day, that, oh yeah, we're gonna go to this street, I have to drive very slowly, it's going to
Yeah.
take me longer.
It's true. I mean, it's even a quiet street would be the same thing.
Right.
You'd
Right.
have to go. So yeah, maybe it's just something that we hope that the streetscape can teach.
Yep.
All right, I like the idea of adding Play Street to that. I'm glad you brought that up, Madeline. See, it is the
I
second thing.
really like the idea of kind of trying to
Was it-
formally
It's
adopt
the second
complete
thing you brought
streets.
up.
I think that's it.
It changes the course of
The conversation,
the
yeah.
conversation.
sorry.
No, that's
No,
great.
it's
I think that's
good.
really good. I
All
think
kinds
that's
of
really
different
good.
weird
And then
places.
throw in destinations, like as
Um,
soon as you said that, it's like, I know what you're talking about now,
Yeah,
because it was something that
you always have to listen to what he says. He doesn't talk much, but
when
when
he
he,
said.
when he does.
I picked up on that.
It's true.
He was astute. A
Oh,
listener,
no,
an
he's, oh, made
observer,
him blush.
and astute commentator. We'd like to,
I think they have something weird going on with local link, local connector, and connector. I feel like that's too many for this. Like link and collector are almost.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
Or is it collector and connector are almost the same thing?
Well, I think the local link would be one that would, let's say, goes from a quiet street to another quiet street, but is not one that you would take to get through a neighborhood, which would be a local collector. You know, that kind of the street that all the other ones flow into would be the collector, whereas the link might just be between two.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
I
wouldn't that be a
hear
type
that
of-
too.
Wouldn't that be wouldn't that be a quiet street then?
Right, could
If it
be.
was
Sort
just
of,
from,
yeah.
Well, there seem to be, the sidewalk seems to be determining which one. There's
Right.
one's two sidewalks on both sides,
Yep,
one's one side, and one's no sidewalks.
yep.
yeah.
So that seems to be their defining, a big chunk of the separation.
Yeah, one's one side.
Yeah, which, which actually, when you say that with one sidewalk, makes Hersey Durrell a perfect example, because it does have one sidewalk, but it's got all those little neighborhoods that feed in.
Yep.
Yep.
I do, does anybody have a concrete example of something in Newmarket that you would consider a connector versus a local connector?
Well, yeah,
A local
connector,
link.
Ash Swamp, maybe, or,
Yep.
Ash Swamp would be a connector.
I think so.
Grant Road.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree, you know, that, so then if we did a local, okay, local link. So,
I would agree with Austin that we do, I think it's a little bit redundant. I don't know that we necessarily have any local links or a
Okay,
need
that's-
for
I'm not
that.
sure which one is redundant, but there's 3 for 2 types of streets, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Because I think there's, your quiet streets will typically have, with no sidewalk, no bike lane, anything. Then there would be, your connector,
yep.
which you would, maybe want a bike lane, or that would be going faster. I don't know if there's a in-between, like a local.
I think Lebanon is, so much bigger, that there are,
yeah, there's more of these.
local streets connecting neighborhoods, but they're not necessarily, going out of town.
Yep.
Whereas we don't,
We don't have that.
we don't
don't
really have that.
No.
Or at least not yet.
So which one are we gonna get rid of?
I think we get rid of the link.
Yeah.
You get rid of local link?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm good with that. Scratch that out.
Well,
Yeah.
just
all right.
as discussion progressed, we could think of examples of some of the other ones that
But-
already exist in Newmarket. So I
Mhm.
think the link is the one that we don't necessarily have and maybe don't really need because we have it defined under other
Yep.
options.
I actually feel like the link is what I was talking about earlier. The local link is like that transition from the higher speed rural area into town. Like that's what it would be, almost what it would be for us. Or am I wrong about that?
I
So
think,
we wouldn't need it.
I think we wouldn't need it because
Yeah.
it would be those transitions because and I can think of a handful of them in Lebanon and those are primarily the streets that branch off of, like a street that goes off of 108 and into an expanded neighborhood. Like you could maybe consider Elm Street that type. But
Yeah.
Elm Street really is more of a local connector or collector and has the one sidewalk. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a little bit redundant when you
Yeah.
can categorize them as something else
I
already.
know,
I was
we can-
thinking about the transitions, oh, sorry. did I cut you off?
no, go.
I was thinking about the transitions, and they might be, a traffic calming transition might be something we could like list on placemaking as a feature that we might want,
Yeah.
just generally.
You mean as
Like
to,
as you
to have that
approach it.
incorporated into a destination?
Yeah, like if it's a placemaking street, like some sort of traffic calming
Right.
coming onto it.
You mean if it's a destination street?
Destination, that's right, not
Okay.
placemaking.
No, just, no, I was pretty sure that's what you were saying, I just.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can incorporate that the approach to it would have those-
Something.
those features,
Yeah.
identifying features to it. Like on Bennett Way, where we may throw in a roundabout. I mean, that'll be
Oh, with the independent.
that'll be a significant traffic calming, noticeable
Well,
Yeah,
transition.
yeah, no,
Again,
that would-
UNH had a big, on North Main Street, past the field house, long straight run, people would do 50. They put that roundabout in, it's fantastic. It really works well.
It does.
So,
It's
and
very
they're putting
big.
another
They are
roundabout in.
effective.
Yeah,
And
it's,
then
So one of the distinguishing features of local link and local collector that's mentioned at the under B3 is separated bicycle lanes should be considered on streets deemed to be local link, and in some cases local collector. So even there, they're kind of
They're kind of
it's hard to
classifying the two
what is the
And that's easy language because it's considered. You don't, it doesn't, you just have to consider it. And I think it's always good to consider whether a separated bike lane is appropriate. I will say it's a difficult thing for public work with snow removal. If suddenly, again, it's snow that really drives a lot of our design decisions because it's, even if it's state funded, we have to enter an agreement that we'll plow it. Doesn't say how often, but it does say, we have to plow it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think a separated bike lane on a connector, a connector street, where traffic's moving, the faster traffic's moving, the more separated you want to be. And I think
Exactly
if we're
right.
going to have a separated bike lane, a connector street is probably where we're going to want it,
I might also point out, I'm not so sure of any town or city in New Hampshire that has a separated bike lane, other than the whole bike path, it's like up 89, going next to 89, but as far as cities and towns,
Well, Portsmouth tried that a little bit. It wasn't super well received, and they do still have some remnants of separated.
it was actually
bike lanes.
separate from
Yes,
the vehicle.
for-
There's,
that they took a portion of the travel lane and made it into a
but it's
separated by
a physical barrier of some sort?
Yeah, a barrier.
Okay, yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
have
right,
a-
that, the barriers, that was what didn't go over, what was the,
Yeah,
they had the pylons up.
yeah,
Oh, the delineators?
Yes.
The, like, the tall skinny things?
Yeah.
right, which is not a very attractive way to go and then not very effective either. I mean, in the case of an actual, incident. But, I mean, this right here, this picture is an example of a separated bike lane.
No, that's not separated, it's,
It is.
because
It's
there's no,
separated by
there's,
there's a curb right here.
there's the curb, I can't,
Yeah.
it seems like something
Oh,
that somebody
Yeah.
could jump.
It looks like,
I mean, you can
think
jump.
that's
do you
just
think there's
looks
an
like-
elevation change
Yes,
between
there
the
is.
travelway and
Yes,
the?
there is.
Okay.
I've been on that, it's a Copenhagen street, I
Okay.
believe, so
Oh, okay.
it's,
Because, my concern always is, the desire is always to protect the bicyclist somehow.
yeah,
And what Boston has now done is put the parking there, and that row of cars creates the barrier between the
Yeah.
traffic. And it seems to be working well. There's a little confusion between pedestrians and bicycles, but
yeah. I mean, I think this is a what we would maybe refer to as a placemaking or destination street. It has everything on it, the whole thing, and there's through traffic, there's transit, and everybody has their place. Higher speed kind of thing. So everybody has their own space. The parking and bicycle lanes is something that you want to be really, really careful of, because opening doors and bicyclists, as they're zooming by, it's a really, I mean, that design can impact safety tremendously. And
there's a fatality in Durham from that.
yeah, exactly right.
I know it's been an issue.
So, got to be careful with that. But I think these pictures might be something to go through and see what elements we see there that we don't pick up in town that we might want to have.
I love these narrow streets. I would imagine these are in the United States.
Because this one looks like Beacon Hill.
This is Beacon. The orange one is Beacon Hill.
Yeah, that's Beacon Hill.
I just thought that it's because it's an historic streetscape. It tells you, and it still works, right? And it's a quiet street. Not much going on there. The one above it is an example of a street in Amsterdam, and I don't really like. I mean, whatever. But what happens on some of these streets is that The travel lane becomes the space where everybody is, whether you're a pedestrian or a bicyclist or a car, and the sidewalks become more of a stationary place where you might sit or you might stand or you might park your bicycle or your yeah. So you the sidewalk is not really a walk. It's more of a you know.
It's on the side of the walk.
Yeah, it's on the side of the walk. That's right.
Someplace it's just a
That's
pedestrian.
right.
But it's really nice because it does create a sense of community and a sense of place.
Yes, it's a place. It has placemaking elements. Yes.
The narrowness, I think, creates shade for walkers without having to plant trees. You know?
You mean the actual
Yeah.
width of the?
Yes,
there's-
the buildings being close enough that you wouldn't need.
Yeah, it's blocking the sun.
Yeah, like so it'd be pleasant to walk down without having to plant trees.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, there's
for
a
shade.
human psychology thing about streets like this that you feel comfortable.
Yes, it's terrible walking on a wide open road.
Yeah.
And people drive fast on them.
Right.
The sun's on you potentially.
Yep.
Exit road.
Yes,
So-
Just like
yes,
that.
yeah.
And across the top, if you notice, they do have lighting. They have
Yeah.
very simple, subtle lighting.
Yeah.
So, Sanka, would this be a two-way street or a one-way street?
I believe this is a one-way street.
In Italy, it'd be two-way.
I've seen a coach bus go down a street like this the wrong way before, and everybody just had to back up because they couldn't
Yeah.
back up, so everybody else would just back up.
Yeah,
That's the way it
that's
is.
the way they do it in Italy. It's like, oh, well, I guess I'm,
So this next
Staying
one,
here.
is this just a pedestrian mall?
Yeah, that's a pedestrian mall, and but it's not. Well, it's pedestrian, yes, but delivery and motorized traffic can happen there. It's just an example of a place where pedestrians have the right of way.
right. And yeah,
We
you-
don't really have anything like this. We would consider this kind of like a plaza or something like that, but it's really just a street, and they just eliminated all distinguishing features and just made it something pleasant to be in.
Well, that's essentially what Church Street in Burlington, they
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, right.
it's building to building sidewalk, the whole
Yeah.
thing. And same Pearl Street in,
Right.
Colorado.
This could be attractive if you wanted to make a street more of a destination, but you didn't have the width to make wide sidewalks or something like that, where you make the whole street one thing.
Well, and that might be what happens on Church Street.
Right.
Where the sidewalk doesn't really get used, it can't be plowed because there's steps on it. So everybody just walks in the street.
Yeah.
And the sidewalk is just,
Or maybe
Difficult
that's something like this.
Yeah.
yeah,
Combination of
yeah,
the two.
it's, essentially all the owners of the buildings have, assumed the sidewalks are theirs. Well, it's more comfortable walking the street.
Well, I
And
think-
there's only a car every hour.
The other interesting thing about this is the cobblestones. And on this picture as well, is the textured paving surface.
Right.
That I think helps to slow down traffic a little
Yes.
bit.
Well, there's actually a really nice feature about cobblestones is that you don't get the skateboarders flying around.
Well, they might be flying, but no.
But no, they just,
how they
they
meant to
don't
be.
go to places where the cobblestones, And that's
It
sometimes
also
a concern.
it's a surfacing that is easily taken up and then put back in.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's a very sustainable way of surfacing.
yeah.
And for low traffic or slow traffic, that may be the ideal way to go, rather than, ripping up a whole street and then disposing of the material, then having it run through, whatever machines they run it through to make it smaller, into smaller aggregate, and then reheating. Oh, you just take up the cobblestones, place them at the side, and then, do
Reset
your
'em.
thing and reset them.
And the other thing is a pedestrian, you can hear cars coming.
Yep.
On the
That's
cobbles.
And there's an example in the next page of a separated bike lane from, I can't remember where that is. It's somewhere in the U.S. However, oh no, it's in Vancouver. That's where it is. Yeah. with planters. So more of a retrofit kind of thing. Not terribly attractive, but very effective.
Yeah, and this is, you see the bicyclists, on the sidewalk rather than in the road. And that's the safer system, but our typical transportation laws, and even Newmarket has it, you're not allowed to ride your bicycle on the sidewalk in Newmarket unless you're under 16 or 18, I can't remember the
Oh,
age.
this one, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's actually much safer bicycle versus pedestrian versus bicycle versus car.
I mean, this to me, I mean, you could almost see this in some of the Portsmouth streets that are narrow enough, but we have some of these narrow streets. And, where we can designate a street with, bicyclists, bicycle traffic in the street, no problem at all. We could do that. Walking would be possible too if there's no through traffic, and we do have some of these streets downtown where something like this could work. Maybe not the design and not the look at, even the curbing may not be necessary as far, because I'm thinking, when we're thinking about, this is all in Holland, right, and they don't plow anything, they don't even have snow plows at the airport anymore. But we need to plow, and if the curb is at the same level, it's not really a curb, but right, if the granite is at the same level as the travel lane, and it's really just a visual marker, then you can plow the whole thing in one fell swoop, and you don't have to worry about, okay, here's the sidewalk, and you have to clean that, and then you have to do the travel lane, and on a narrow space, not narrow street. You can create you can reduce the width of the lane. Let's say, I think it's Church Street, where the pavement goes from one house to the other, from one side to the other. I imagine that it's really good for plowing to be able to get through there. And if you wanted to put a sidewalk there, then that would become kind of a problem. But if you had different surfacing that was all at the same level, but visually different, you create this kind of effect, and you don't inhibit the maintenance so much.
Yeah, and
The winter
if the
maintenance.
traffic was going slow enough, you could have, just nothing, it could all just be one space.
Right.
With no need for
Right.
even,
Right.
Church, chapel, and central all would be
Yeah.
conducive to
Yeah.
combined space used by all.
yes. And Central, I think, there is a sidewalk, but typically when people go up to the Polish Club, like people just walk in the middle of the road.
Right.
They don't use the sidewalk.
Yeah, same thing on Church Street. Chapel Street, people use the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that one, people do use it. Maybe it's wide enough, it's not so treacherous.
So we note here Madeline's observation that the sidewalk, when it becomes kind of a space for stationary activities, has a placemaking element.
Yeah.
Everybody suddenly has a front porch.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. You put a bench there, and all of a sudden, it's a place to gather. And here in Amsterdam, that's actually something that is, I think it's probably in other cities too, but it's encouraged that you do that outside of your home. For that reason, there's the Vancouver Street, but then the next one is that it seems empty and not as welcoming and not as that one, yeah, exactly right. That I don't remember where this is.
You see a lot of this in
I think
DC.
Estonia, I think.
You see a lot of this in DC,
Now, this is,
on M Street
Yeah.
and on.
So I think it's a similar approach, but it's not as well executed. It doesn't feel the same. It has not the same kind of placemaking quality, even though it may be more akin to what our streetscape looks like based on the building styles. That there's more diversity. Right.
well, part of this is there's simply not, there's no window boxes,
Yeah.
it's
So it's just, right,
It's
it's,
very
the
stark.
placemaking hasn't happened, but,
That's why you see
I
that in
think the
DC.
buildings are farther apart and
Mhm.
shorter.
yep,
There's no shade. I bet you if you put, you know, this street, I think needs trees.
It needs, yeah.
If you planted trees, you might help to
Mhm.
make it a little more inviting and provide shade, I would think.
the placemaking element.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, hold it, it looks like there's one shrub in front of the gray thing that looks like a poorhouse.
Yeah,
Sure, it's a
you
dungeon.
flip that page, and there's a tree in the picture, and all of a sudden, the whole place looks
Looks
so
different.
much
It
more
does.
Yeah.
inviting.
Well, if you contrast these two, if you go back to that plaza, this picture, the yellow
The-
buildings and the plaza,
Yeah,
very similar. There's nothing there, except this one has trash cans, planters, a couple of trees, and it doesn't seem as barren.
I mean, I can see on a nice sunny day, I could see that we're filled with people milling around, going into whatever those shops are.
There's a nonprofit in Pittsburgh that is trying to get street trees everywhere in cities. And they've quantified the value of street trees for increase in economic value from shading, from increased business. And it's kind of interesting to see their stats.
They also lower the ambient temperature.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's bigger cities, you have heat island effect.
Yeah, no, it's,
Yeah,
Is this 3D
I think
painting?
perhaps as a feature of the quiet street, we may say that there should be adequate shade for pedestrians.
yes.
Oh,
And
that's
it does keep
nice.
the overall temperature down for everyone, it's a good thing, but yes, the shade is, you're absolutely right. The shade is important.
Well, certainly, we all notice that in the summertime in a parking lot, there was 120 degrees in a
Yeah.
parking lot, and it's only a 95-degree day out.
Yeah.
But it's all that black asphalt, and you're in the
Yeah.
middle of it.
Yeah, it just,
Well, and the shade encourages pedestrians to get out there, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
Nobody's gonna
it
take
feel
a walk.
covered too, you know, it's like, not just the actual heat, but the psychological, you know, not being, you know, out in the open like that, you know?
Hmm.
having cover,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is this 3D painting?
I was gonna say, this is just,
The 3D
Yeah.
sidewalks,
Is
yeah,
that what this is? Is
yeah,
this
Yeah.
those are paint, yeah, those are,
It's just painted on, and it,
the eyes?
optical illusion, and it's one of the traffic calming measures that some people have played with, and
I've only seen pictures of these, I've never seen one, I'd love to see one, because
I would like that too.
I would like, because, I mean, I can't imagine that you wouldn't slow down when you,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about trying to paint a deer on the road in front of my house. I was figuring it'd be stretched out like they stretch out the lettering on the highway. Yeah.
or you could just do it with a big deer in the headlights while they're coming at you.
Oh, I do have a fake deer I put in by the side of the road. I have a decoy.
Do you?
Yeah,
This is
Yeah.
interesting.
yeah.
We'll-
The only problem is people honk at it on occasion.
maybe I should do that. That would be- that
A
would
little
be-
insight into your mind.
Let's discuss.
Otherwise, that picture is pretty bleak, isn't it?
It is pretty bleak, but
I mean,
because,
if that sidewalk, that entrance.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
you know, it needs some.
What about the last one, those, green islands? put
Yeah, so
into-
this one, I got this one, and what came to me was the concerns and complaints in New Village, and
Oh, yeah.
how people are saying that people are just flying down the roads. Well, it's straight, flat, and wide. And if some of these were tossed in, you would certainly slow people down.
Right.
And I think it's the idea of skinny roads and put your roads on a diet. The same thing could be said about the cars going the wrong way up into New Village. I guess is a concern of some people are just going the wrong way because it's quicker. Well, you make it narrow enough that you can't pass, and suddenly if you have to back out onto Elm Street, you might not do that anymore. I don't know. So this is just one concept. I've been in two towns that have done temporary things like this with big planters they made out of landscape timbers, and then Public Works could pick them up with a loader with forks on it. but they're so big that they would stop a car from going through it. And they picked them up for the winter time so they could snowplow and then put them back out in the summer. And Dover did it actually just to experiment with making a road a dead end. And so they just put one at one end. It was right by the post office.
Right, that I'm doing, one I do, right. And what, was it Colin who was talking about that sort of thing at doing temporary planters, in New Village?
Yeah, we talked about that as a potential like pilot project.
Pilot
to
project
see
for what,
before we actually do a reconstruction of the road.
which I think is a really, is a good idea.
I do too.
But yeah, that's interesting, seeing, once again, seeing it, and it would definitely keep people, it's have to slow down. You're playing, you have to dodge the obstacles to,
Yeah, just as soon as you're doing serpentines, and every military base did the same thing in the 80s. After a few gate crashers, they made the little serpentine that you had. Of course, they also had sniper posts, but you have to slow down to do this. You can't crash the gate and go flying in.
Yep. I like that. I mean, especially as a temporary kind of way to try something out.
Yeah, and this
Planters.
could even be a BMP for stormwater management. It could be, an opportunity to allow rainwater to go in.
Yeah, I like where your head's at.
that's.
Drew, what's that?
I like where your head's at.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she BMP. She woke up.
Stormwater now.
Ooh, stormwater.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's, if we go to the next set of pictures here, there are some of those elements present here as well. The first picture, the first thing I think of is, dog toilet,
What the,
honestly.
unfortunately,
But that's any green space. I mean, that's.
I know, but I don't know, it just,
Yeah.
I should not have said it, I should
yeah.
I should
now-
control
now-
myself
now-
better.
Now I can't unsee it. I mean,
See,
it's
there you
just-
go.
Yeah, what are they calling it? Somebody had some kind of negative comment about the trees going away in front of Willie House, and they were calling it a green desert. And just they were concerned that the whole downtown was turning into a green desert, which is kind of surprising to me because we planted all those trees. I mean, we've done it in the last 20
What
years.
is that supposed to, I mean,
They were concerned that the Willie House took down 2 big elm trees
yes,
and just opened it right up. They were dying
Right,
trees.
right.
No, they're ash. I'm sorry, they're ash. They were dying trees, and it was on private property, so there's not much the town could do about it. Property owner's trees, they're on his property, and they were dying, and
They were gonna-
oh, yeah,
but
especially if they're dying, I mean,
Yeah.
They
otherwise,
have limbs falling into the
But-
building, and
but we do, and we did add all the trees to Main Street, which we didn't used to have, and they're getting bigger.
Yep.
So I think they're nice.
Yeah.
It may not be the perfect tree all the time, but I like having some green space, and yeah, the stormwater planters.
yep,
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me because we're right at the river. Our whole downtown is right at the river, so it would make sense to incorporate something like that.
and the bottom picture on page 2 of that set, the, inexpensive definition of pedestrian area with striping, I think there are some streets in Newmarket where that might be something that one
Well, that's the one that
consider.
got me, itching in my seat as a former ambulance attendant. It drives me nutty to see people walking on the street with their backs to traffic. And because drivers are inattentive and they're all over the place, and I've just seen so many people hit
Yeah,
that I really do not like that one bit at all. I I do not like that.
I noticed that right away.
But to walk like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly
It's-
it doesn't look very safe
And
on
I
that street anyway.
I just am very, very opposed to people walking with their back to traffic. And once you give that, it gives the impression you can walk either way.
Yeah.
I don't know, just that one I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, I mean, looks like a shoulder, but I think the idea of painting where it could be a temporary one, could be to try something out. It could be on a quieter street. I mean, this to me the street, because I don't have any houses on it. It seems like it would be a pretty fast moving traffic flow anyway. But in an in-town area, it might be a way to create a space on the side of the street that's a multi-purpose path that can still be plowed in the winter very easily, and designates a space for
Well,
pedestrians and bicyclists.
even in this path, in this photograph, you can see there's a path adjacent
Yeah, where they're walking.
where people who feel unsafe walking
Yes.
over there, I'm not walking in the middle of the street, I'm gonna walk over.
So
And-
what's different for this person?
Yeah, they're just,
They have a
they're
stroller.
not that smart.
They
Right.
couldn't
Yeah, they
mount
have a
it.
stroller.
They have a yeah, right. They have a stroller.
So-
and a
Oh,
walker.
good, so they're walking with a baby with their back to traffic.
Right.
No, but
Okay.
the point I think is that they can't walk on that strip very easily.
And they can't walk on that path easily.
Yeah, so they have to use the less desirable way,
So
the paving.
we could do this on 108, but we're not going to.
No.
You know, this
Yeah.
is for, like you said, a neighborhood street, if it was paved side to side or
Yeah,
as an inexpensive.
Oh, what-
I mean, this, you know.
Well, this
be
this
108.
just being a one-way street, I just think it's all so inappropriate, because
Yeah.
one-way streets, people tend to drive a little quicker, there's nobody coming
right.
at them, missing them
There
by
are no
8
driveways
inches.
coming in.
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
this is, to me, a very inappropriate
Yeah.
pedestrian.
I think it's actually a just what you call it.
Example, what not to do?
Well, that too. No, we have it on 108 too.
A shoulder?
The shoulder, exactly
Is,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all it is. A shoulder with a curb.
Yes.
Right.
Bump outs, we already have those on Main Street. Maybe not as elaborate, but we have them, and they are.
Yeah, so ours were redesigned, the bump outs were originally designed to have some vegetation, and they were lowered to be at street level for snow removal. I think the bump outs with some vegetation would make them a little bit safer, a little bit more clear.
Yeah.
Currently, people do park on the bump outs sometimes.
Especially
do
the one
get
at Crack
ticketed.
Skulls. That's
Yeah, they get
so-
ticketed,
yeah.
but if he's around. But even the people getting ticketed are, sometimes are kind of unaware that they shouldn't have parked there. But, snow removal has a place, I guess, and I do think things are changing. I think that's one of the considerations we should be considering, some of our parking regulations with the reduction in snow removal. Certainly, our parking ban starts November 1st, and usually around Christmas, we're wondering if we're gonna have a white Christmas or not. So, if we really extend that on both ends of the year,
Yeah.
we've got 2 months, so, a tenth of the year, we're saying no parking when there's really no snow removal needs. But, that's different.
I wanted to mention on the page before, that bike lane looks really wide. It looks like we probably could just get plowed with a regular plow.
This one, the middle one.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
wonder
a,
if that's why it's.
that's a bike lane and a pedestrian
Oh,
lane.
is that what that?
Yeah, so the bikes travel on the green, the pedestrians travel on the black.
Well, but then there's a sidewalk.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I don't know.
Or it might be two-way. In some urban areas, they have two-way bike traffic,
Sure.
Definitely.
where there's a lot of commuter bike traffic,
Mhm.
high-speed commuter bicyclists.
Yeah.
They have two-way. So
Yep.
maybe it's that?
I'm saying if there's an like for if snow removal's
Yeah, but
a
then,
concern, like having one wide enough that it could just get plowed like a regular street, would be a
Even though it's a multi-purpose tool,
Yeah.
I
What
see
is
what you're
that?
saying.
The black one.
The black one's.
Well, it might also be for like microtransit or moped, something of that sort too. I don't know.
I think it may be a safety lane to avoid, if you notice farther up the street, there's parking where this green strip
Yeah.
is, so as you're traveling along, you have the door open, and if you stay on the green
Yeah.
as a bicyclist,
safe,
you don't get,
right.
Right,
yeah.
you don't, because that is
So it's
a real
safety.
safety concern.
Mhm. On the last page, the bump outs, are, one of the results is the shortening of the distance between one side of the street to the other, and that's something that we were talking about on, Exeter Road as well, because it's so wide, and, you're traveling, I don't know, going across essentially 4 lanes, even though it's just a two-lane street.
You're in a kill zone for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
Which is-
and something like this,
You-
especially if it's raised a little bit. might
You know,
be a way to do
another
it.
thing that UNH had done is they put those black bollards in at every crosswalk.
Mhm.
And at first people were saying, I hate those things. It looks like there's somebody at the crosswalk. Again, it slowed people down. It's like they weren't sure if that was a person. It turns out it's just a black bollard. But the thing's got a big ball on it, has a little shape to it, and
Yeah,
people slow down. But I'm a believer in reducing the length of a crosswalk whenever possible. Again, some of our wide streets put people in the kill zone right at an intersection.
right.
It's lots of fun to cross at the end of that way going in by Rite Aid.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah, I
one.
know,
that-
well, it's a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they'll probably, if they do a roundabout, will they have an island in the center so that you can cross
If,
part and then,
if it were to be a roundabout, the pedestrians are difficult for pedestrians
Oh, yeah,
to
I'm sure.
travel through because there's so many different maneuvers. So the sidewalk would likely take you around the corner, from Bennett to, on either side
Yep.
of the roundabout. So you cross where the roadway is more narrow and
Okay.
it's just the 2 lanes.
I see.
So they try to keep
Makes
them
perfect
out of the roundabout area and then,
Okay.
on the other sides. So it would shift where the crossing is, but it would make it a much shorter distance that you have to cross and less maneuver conflicts. That one was a significant concern for PD, which is why we submitted the application and DOT saw fit to do the RSA because it is a major safety concern.
Yeah, no, it's nice the way they do the crosswalks at the roundabouts because they move it away a little bit. So and there's a island of refuge, so you only have to worry about cars coming from one direction.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's,
And it's not a bunch of left-turning cars that you're looking at all these people coming at you from different directions, which I kind of like. Yeah.
even in a car trying, making a left turn out of Bennett Way, besides looking at traffic bookways, you got to be looking across at the Rite Aid parking lot to see if somebody's pulling out because
Right.
they're always sure that they have the right of way. But, so, yeah, or you just don't go out that way. It's the easiest thing to do and go down there and see.
So, just to, in summary, maybe a little bit, I think we saw a lot of good examples for elements that would be desirable in quiet streets. Different,
And sort of destination streets too.
yes, and destination streets, right,
Yeah.
that's right. That's true, yeah, and those as well. We didn't see so much, I think, yet, examples to accommodate bicyclists in our area, in our streetscape, the way it exists, I think. I mean, an urban street, city street, with, public transit and bicycles, and that's one thing. And we could do that on a destination street. The first picture, take the streetcars out and you're kind of there. But when it comes to going up 152 or Grant Road or Ash Swamp, we don't really have good examples in here yet. So maybe that's something we can keep an eye out for. How to accommodate bicycle traffic successfully. And I know that Durham has, or tries to, in various ways, alert people to the fact that bicyclists are also in the street. Whether that's on pavement markings or whether that's signs, or separated bike lanes. So there's certainly something that we can also learn from surrounding towns and maybe take some pictures from here, and not from across the pond.
Yeah. Well, they're a little more progressive across the pond, I think, in a lot of times. But
True.
one concept too for a connector for bicycling. Bart has been looking at a connector between Newmarket and Durham UNH, completely separate from vehicle roads. And there's a whole string of publicly held land, whether it's Nature Conservancy, Society for Forest Protection, whatever, Town of Durham land, UNH land. There's a whole string of it, and there could be a bicycle walking jogging trail that would be just maybe stone dust or something like that. So that's something that he's been, I think, talking to both Durham and UNH about, because almost all of it's not in Newmarket.
Right.
But it would be a safe way of getting Newmarket people to UNH on a bicycle without having to contend with 108 traffic.
Right. The ideal way to go.
Yeah,
Like the path that was at one point part of the conversation to get from Durham to Portsmouth.
the wagon track trail. Yeah, which still should happen, but I mean, but we do have something that's similar, is Rockingham Rail Trail,
Yes.
and that's fantastic. It's highly used. It's used in the wintertime by snowmobilers, and horseback people are using it. So those trails can be, and Dover's got a good example. Theirs is all paved, the community path, I think they call it.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way from the south end of Dover to the north end of Dover.
Yep.
And-
I think, and something not to be underestimated is the impact it has on, on the town as a destination too. If you can bike from here to there and safely through town as well, that makes you a pretty attractive place to go to.
Right.
Especially if you can connect safely to, a Rockingham rail trail or something like that. I'd like to close this at this point, if that's okay. Yeah, I think we've kind of exhausted it a little bit. Lindsay, were you able to take some
I
constructive
took notes on,
You
yeah,
did,
so, what we could maybe do is, before our next meeting, give some more thought, or maybe collect some more photos for those regional connector or the local collector streets. Since we don't really have a good sense on those, we can talk a little bit more about some of
Yep.
the streetscape elements on those. And, I could maybe pull some additional complete street policy examples
from other towns?
from other towns for consideration, to see if there's something that, I mean, the one from Lebanon I noticed was 2012, that was a while ago.
Yeah.
There are probably some other good ones around, actually, not probably, I know there are some other good ones around that we could maybe reference and see if there are some additional things that we would want to consider or talk about to put in, and then we could start working on a draft.
Didn't Portsmouth just do a complete street policy or something?
Probably, I'm not familiar with theirs, but I
Yeah.
know that a lot of the surrounding communities
Yeah.
have been working on developing those or adopting them. So there are some others out there.
I do think that one of the things about this, and I did note the 2012 date, but was the fact that 13 years later, this is still relevant.
Mhm.
It's not, it's not dated, which I think is also an important piece to consider. We don't want to write something now or put something in place now that 10 years from, that people are going to be tossing out the window. The definitions, the descriptions are still relevant,
Mhm.
which I believe, personally feel that it's a good policy. It sticks.
Okay, anything that you would like to add to the agenda for next meeting?
I always think we should, did we talk about the parking, wasn't it on the?
There are a couple of other agenda items. I could give a brief update if
The
you
parking
want
study
that.
update?
Yes.
The parking study
okay.
happened?
If it's brief, I'm just looking at the time and
Yeah.
we're moving toward 9 o'clock.
So the parking study, the data collection effort was May 8th, 9th, and 10th.
Oh, that's right.
That is complete. I'm not sure, I haven't heard what we got for data on the 10th. It's a very rainy morning, so I don't know how that went, but,
I think they didn't start till noon.
okay,
Because
yeah,
we did
because
it
of the
later in the
weather,
day,
that
right.
makes sense. So SRPC is gonna be compiling all the data that was collected, and we should have some preliminary information from them in the next couple of weeks, and then they'll start putting together the report that kind of summarizes what we are seeing for available capacity and usage, and then some recommendations to go forward. So we will have, at subsequent meetings, more of an update and time frame on when we'll have that report and information to share.
I think that parking seems to be a resounding theme in almost every master plan committee meeting, or at least the ones I'm involved with, that we should really try and work on parking. I know that, the part's been, well, let's hold off until we get this parking study done, but we'll have it. But I think we've got to keep parking on the forefront. We have to do something real rather than just documents are good, but when the public can see it, that's tangible. If we can add a space, change a policy, do anything to improve parking, I think we'll be doing something real. So I think, what you mentioned, having something on the agenda all the time, I think parking should be always on our forefront.
Yeah, I think the road typology, parking, public transit, and wayfinding are kind of the topics that we've had, and I think we should keep at it.
Continually,
Yeah, because they all interconnect anyways.
Right.
It's transportation after all.
It's just, that's just such a common complaint amongst everybody.
Yeah.
Residents, business owners.
Everywhere,
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah,
You go to the beach this time of year, and now, Hampton is resident-only parking by the beach. So if you're coming in as a tourist, you're paying significant money
yeah,
to park. And obviously, they want tourists.
yeah.
It's,
And it affects the economic viability of the downtown,
Yeah.
of doing
Yeah.
business in town.
yet residents, have something to say. They pay taxes, they want to park near their homes.
The other document that we might want to all review again, or maybe we did already, is the Plan NH charrette results, because there were some recommendations in there relating to parking, EV charging, signage, wayfinding. So that might be something to have available for the next meeting, or before the next meeting, just to look it over. It's on the website, and it's illustrated. It's a nice document. I would recommend it. It fits really. It brings a lot of these elements together. So might be a good one to just have in the back of our minds. I do think that the signage and wayfinding piece is really important too, because to find parking and to do the transitions, and what do we want to look like, it's going to be a process. But I think we should try to keep moving that one forward as well, so that we can arrive at a place maybe by the end of the summer or toward the end of the summer, where we can make some recommendations for either, trying something out, having a way to make it real.
Hmm. And was there, you said something about parking ordinance that the police department was working on?
Not like, not actively revising, but when we started discussing the parking study and what that's going to give us for information, police chief was very interested because they were looking at making some revisions to the parking ordinance, and we really should be considering
Right.
the capacity and the usage, and we likely have areas, I mean, we know some of the little parking lots on the north and south portions of Main Street are underutilized, or are currently utilized by construction vehicles that are
Right.
happening in those areas. So we have some of those parking spaces available, and what can we do to bring up the utilization of those, or should we be looking at alternatives that are more centralized within the downtown area, and how do we, so it's just a matter of getting some of that information and informing as we consider these revisions,
Yeah.
where it goes from there.
I'd be very interested in that, because one concept I have a difficult time with is Shanda Park sells out like that every year, and the other ones we have a hard time selling out, so maybe we should charge more for Shanda Park, and people would walk a little further and go to this one, and it'd be more revenue, and,
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think signage and parking fees are
Yeah.
also in the conversation.
yeah. Yeah.
So those are things that we're looking to have some recommendations from the parking study that we can start to explore how
Right.
how we make some changes.
Yeah, so I know if I go to Portsmouth, I park for free because there's a spot, and I walk for all the way through Bohanco Park. It's a great walk, but I'm so cheap, I'll do that. Well, maybe the other people are so cheap, they'll park way over there and walk into town because they're
Right.
being charged too much.
Oh, no.
Right.
I park at the Foundry lot, it's $1 an hour, it's just easy.
Yeah,
Do we need EV charging as a separate kind of thing? Do we want to tackle that at all?
I'm not 100% sure. I mean, we have a few stations, and now I have an electric car, and I realize that I don't even want to charge at a public charging spot. It takes too long, and and I don't want to have too many charge cycles. And the public perception isn't all that positive of it. A lot of taxpayers are like, "That's free." And I said, "Why? I should be getting gas for free."
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be free. It can be, but for people who may, not have the ability to put a fast charger at their, maybe they're renting or whatever, and
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
that we have a way to accommodate that too, or encourage that.
Stratham's put in, by Planet Fitness, there's what, 3 or 4 EV stations?
It might even
Yeah.
be more, yeah.
Yeah,
there's
more.
Several there.
I know that I've seen people there, I believe it is a pay,
Mhm.
credit card. I don't have an electric car, it's not something I paid all that much attention to, but I know they're there, I know they're being used. I don't know whether I'm assuming it was a private investment, I don't really know, but they're there.
A lot of the
Maybe
businesses.
this is how you get people into the remoter
Yeah, just about to say
lots.
that. Put them in the outside
Yeah,
lots.
Put
Right.
EV
Put EV
Right.
charging
Yeah.
stations there, and then they
Yeah.
walk down.
Well,
And
the Foundry Garage in Portsmouth, every
That many.
level has at least 2, if not 3 EV only spots.
Right.
And I think that's part of it, is it's keeping them out of the main part of downtown. And, if somebody's parking there for the day,
Yeah.
then,
The Durham Energy Committee did a study on, they actually did a bunch of different types of EV charging stations, and they said it was kind of a wash whether they charge or don't charge, because there's a credit card processing company that runs it,
right.
does do all that, and they skim off the top of
Sure.
it. And then the infrastructure to do the smart chargers that can do all that
Right.
were so much more expensive than the dumb ones that just, all they do charge, and you can't tell if somebody's at it, but, so they said it was kind of a wash as far as which one to do. It was Charles Forsey with the Energy Committee that did a kind of a big analysis.
And once again, those, I guess, are
Interesting.
the ones in town being used.
And that was incorporated into the parking study, the data collection component, we did make sure that we had those spaces designated with a specific number so that we could determine if they were being used, and how they're being used in comparison with some of the other spaces.
I always thought the idea of just putting up a camera on the parking spots up in Weaver's Row, because people was always saying there's never a spot, there's never a spot. It's like, there's usually a spot. And so you had a camera, you could actually just do a fast thing and really see it.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of mixed reviews. There's a lot of complaints about not enough parking, and there's also a lot of like, I drove down Main Street and there were 3 empty spaces as I drove by. Like, it just depends on the day and the time of day, really.
I really think having a parking enforcement person has helped tremendously. Because it used to be that the shop owners and the people who lived on Main Street parked all day long on Main Street. One of them had, a sign for her business, and she would get the select spot so you could see her car. And it just, and we had a 2-hour limit, but there was no enforcement. So why have the limit?
I think the issue with parking on Main Street is mostly that if there is no spot that you can identify, where do you go? And and there is no way do you go, and then you're through Main Street and you're done. That's you're just not parking. You're not stopping. So there is no alternative that's right there. Yes, there's an alternative, right down the road, but you don't know about. You're never going to find it, and it's too far, and you just wanted to stop for that coffee. And now you're not going to do it because you couldn't find that parking spot. So those exist, but I think if you're going there and you're doing something that's a little bit longer lasting, well, then you're definitely going to find a parking spot. You're more likely to look a little bit, and so, this is just in response to people who say, "Oh, I can't find a parking spot." Well, what were you going to be doing that you didn't find one? How long did you spend? Did you just drive by and there wasn't anything, so you kept going, or? So I would take those kinds of comments with a grain of salt, I guess. But I agree that it's not, it's just so invisible, the parking besides the on-street parking. So we'll keep that one up, and I would like to have maybe that can be one of our markers, that we have something real in the real world that gets changed and is not made of paper.
Well,
It could be cardboard, but
I'm thinking 30 years ago, parking wasn't a problem, but half the stores were empty.
yeah.
I mean,
Needing parking
downtown's
is a good,
thriving.
Yeah.
it's a good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
I'll take, if there's nothing else, a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.
I've got work to do when I get